So it begins. Russia officially surrendered Kherson without a fight, and the main infiltrator/collaborator Kirill Stremousov is no more. And at the same time, Russians retreat as far as to Crimea, and they ask Ukraine for peace talks with absolutely no conditions. But to be honest, all this does feel like too good to be true. And so we do have a reasonable question to ask: is Russia preparing a trap, or is this a genuine surrender? But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video is from Ukrainian Air Force, which show their skills and a little bit of combat action. Then we go to Kharkov, where we can see the monument of a Russian writer Alexander Pushkin being demolished. And the reason for such monument installations is for Ukrainians to distance themselves as much as possible from Russians. Before we talk about the main event of the day, the situation at the south, let's quickly talk about the updates from the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians gained a little bit territory next to Svatovi and intensified their offensive operations next to Crimea. And at the same time, the main focus of Russians in this region was next to Bakhmut and Avdiivka. On this map we can see the most significant fighting in the last 24 hours. And as you can see, it pretty much confirms my previous statement that the most active combat zone right now is next to this Svatovi-Crimea road. But then, as we move to the south, to the city of Mariupol, we have several reports claiming that Russians started to plant mines to the west of this city. At this very moment, Mariupol is relatively out of touch for Ukrainians. That is why Russians mining this area kinda begs the question: are they preparing for Ukraine's counteroffensive? And so far, the only possible direction I can see at this very moment is that if Ukrainians will approach from Vuhledar. But for now, it is way too early to tell. And finally, here is the video from Dnipro, which shows us the consequences of a Russian attack using Iranian drone Shahid. Alright, and now let's talk about the most interesting part, the situation in the south. And while I'm going there, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you like this style of daily updating. You can also follow me on Instagram and send me a message and I will reply to you. Alright, so the first video from a couple of days ago shows us a very big convoy of Ukrainian military vehicles in the northern part of Kherson region waiting to launch counteroffensive. And recently, even Kirill Stremousov himself acknowledged that these Ukrainians were kinda testing the defenses of Russians. And yes, there was some very big news today about Senior Stremousov. I think you already know it, so just keep watching. And then the Russian installed administration in Kherson also acknowledged that these Ukrainians were not able to penetrate the defenses of Russians. And to make things worse, the Ministry of Defense of Russia lied. Made a statement that these Ukrainians attacked, but they were repelled by Russians and suffered significant losses. And finally, we do have one more claim from Kirill Stremousov, who mentioned that Ukrainians were able to advance next to Snigurivka. And this was his very last statement. Because today, Kirill Stremousov, on his way to Khinechensk, his car suffered fatal damage. And as a result, it has been confirmed both by Russians and Ukrainians, Kirill Stremousov is no longer with us. And later on, most likely for saying not to panic over and over again, Kirill Stremousov was awarded the Medal of Courage by Putin himself. I do have more pictures and videos from the place of the accident, and the car is pretty much completely destroyed. Most likely, I'm not allowed to show this footage on YouTube. That is why I will upload some pictures on Discord, and I'll upload the rest to my Patreon. And if you want to see these photos and videos, the links will be down below. Alright, and now back to Kherson. Because today, the Ministry of Defense of Russia, Sergey Shoigu, released an order to surrender the city and to evacuate to the left side of Dnipro river. And in order to make this decision, Shoigu had to first listen to the report by the Russian army general Sergei Surovikin Surovikin about the situation in Kherson. And what he said is that the city itself, as well as all the other neighboring settlements, are no longer able to function properly and provide security for its residents. That is why he proposed to withdraw forces to the left side of Dnipro river and build defenses from there. And the main reason for this is to save the lives of the Russian soldiers. This relocation will take approximately a couple of days, and besides this, Surovikin also made some other untrustworthy statements, such as that in October alone Ukrainian forces lost 12,000 soldiers, while the losses of Russia were 7 to 8 times lower. And then once again he emphasized the possibility of Ukrainians destroying Kakhovka Dam and flooding the area. And right now I'll present you the unexpected reactions of some other very important Russian people. First of all, we have the statement by the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was always previously criticizing the Russian army for any retreat. But this time he said that he fully supports Surovikin and respects this decision. And he calls this withdrawal with the minimal losses a true achievement. Next we have the president of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, who says that he agrees with the opinion of Prigozhin about his opinion about Surovikin. He basically says that this was a very complicated but the right decision to save thousands of lives. Well, nothing complicated to me, to be honest, but what do I know about military tactics? And in the end of his statement, Ramzan Kadyrov emphasized that this is not a surrender. This is a tactical relocation. And the third person in this honorable list is one of the main Russian propagandists, Margarita Simonyan. And she said that the retreat from Kherson was the correct decision because in the future Russia will need this army to win in the total war. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one of these three opinions is most closest to your personal point of view. And even though the surrender was only announced today, we already have some counteroffensive and withdrawal footage. First of all, in this video from Kherson city, we can see that Russians continue to remove their flags basically from everywhere. And while retreating, Russians were reportedly destroying the bridges. For example, right here we can see a bridge next to Snegurivka. And then right here is the destroyed bridge from its neighbor Novokayerskaya. Another bridge that has collapsed is located in Daryevka. And in addition to bridges, Russians were also destroying their pontoons. Right here we can see the reported locations of all these bridges and pontoons which were eliminated. And in addition to bridges which were previously mentioned, they also include bridges next to Lvova, Sadova and pontoon next to Antonovsky Bridge. And then in this video we can see Russians allegedly retreating on their military vehicles from Kherson. And the following satellite image shows us the trenches and underground constructions which Russians abandoned while withdrawing. And as you can see, they even left mannequins dressed in Russian uniform to make it look like they still there. But once again, it looks like they don't know about the existence of satellites. And before we talk about whether this is a genuine surrender or a fake trap by Russians, here's just couple more videos from recently liberated settlements in Kherson. First of all, earlier today we had several reports about Ukrainians liberating Snegurivka. We then even received this picture of a Ukrainian flag on this tower from this city. And as you can see from this map, it does show that Ukrainians at least contested Snegurivka. Next we have a picture from liberated Kalinivske. And this map does show that this settlement has been fully retaken by Ukrainians. Moving more to the southwest, to Pravdine, we can see a video from this recently liberated settlement as well. And overall, here is the progress that Ukrainians were able to achieve just in the last 48 hours alone. The deoccupation of Kherson region is most certainly on its own way. But then, believe it or not, we have even more interesting footage from Crimea. First of all, right here we have a satellite image from Armyansk which shows us that Russians started digging trenches and building defensive positions on Crimean Peninsula. And then, approximately 60 kilometers to the east, we have another satellite image from Chonhar. This image is dated as August 12th, and then we have the second satellite image dated as October 10th. And as you can see right here, Russians made a significant progress in creating defensive positions as well. So the main question is, does this mean that this withdrawal of Russians from Kherson can go as far south as to Crimea? And in case this is true, Russians are subconsciously ready to lose this entire territory. This situation in Kherson for Russians is way more devastating for them than Ukraine's counteroffensive in Kharkiv back in September. Because since then, Russia did this partial mobilization and got allegedly 300,000 new soldiers. They received new missiles and drones for Iran. And then there's Crimea, which is relatively close to Kherson, so they can easily resupply themselves. And all this makes me think that the surrender of Kherson is just too good to be true. And I'm not the only one sharing this sentiment. We have this statement from the head of Mykolaiv region, Vitaly Kim, who is saying that Russians will not surrender Kherson just like that. He says that whenever Russians claim one thing, their action proved to be completely the opposite. Then we have the statement from the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, who is saying that for as long as there are no Ukrainian flags in Kherson, it is way too early to tell about Russian retreat from the city. And because of this, Ukraine does not pay too much attention to the words and actions of Russians, and they continue to do the same thing what they used to do, which is Ukraine's own surveillance and decision making based on intelligence data. Podolyak also mentioned that a part of Russian forces still remain in Kherson city, and then Russians started bring these workers, who can very well be Russian soldiers dressed as civilians. But despite all the actions and goodwill gestures by Russians, Zelensky still claims that the surrender of Kherson is not the reason to resume peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. And speaking about the peace talks, the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Maria Zakharova, she says that Russia is ready to resume peace talks with Ukraine as is. She then even calls Ukrainians as partners, no longer Nazis. She says that Russia does not have any additional circumstances, and then she started nervously laughing. I mean, just take a look for yourself.
В очередной раз как-то, наверное,
And so, as a result of everything that has been mentioned in today's episode, it is still not 100% clear whether this is a genuine surrender or a Russian trap. So I just ask you to please let me know in the comments what do you think. If you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link or become my Patreon, where you'll be able to see additional footage. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.